Welcome back to the deep dive. We are taking a really close look today at a stack of quite compelling personal sources. They present this comprehensive and, frankly, pretty revolutionary philosophy.
Hmm.
We're focusing on a set of notes titled The Journey of Yielding to Joy. And the aim here is to define joy not as, not as something we feel, but as something we actually do.
That's exactly right. Our mission today is sort of to move beyond that surface idea of just happiness or, fleeting emotion.
Okay.
This source material really forces us to look at J.Y, that's the journey of yielding, as more of a structural thing, intentional, and, crucially, a non-fleeting force in your life.
Like the architecture, not the pink color you said before we started.
Precisely. It's the underlying structure of contentment.
And what immediately jumps out, I think, is that core premise. It really challenges, conventional wisdom, doesn't it?
Right.
These notes, they state it so emphatically. Joy is explicitly not a feeling. It's framed as an act of choice, which means we probably need to spend some time figuring out what exactly this choice is, and maybe why making that distinction between feeling and choosing is so vital for, resilience, according to these notes.
Exactly. That foundational difference is really where this whole philosophy starts to unfold. The source material argues pretty strongly that if joy is tied only to feeling, then it's fundamentally, unreliable.
Unreliable how? Because feelings change.
Yes. We all know emotions come and go, right? They're often based on external things. The weather's nice, you get a raise, some kind of temporary win.
Sure.
So if your joy depends on those conditions, then it's kind of destined to disappear the moment life, throws you a curveball.
That feels almost difficult to fully accept in modern life, though. I mean, aren't we sort of conditioned by everything around us, consumer culture, media, to think joy is that explosive thing, that immediate emotion tied to an experience?
Like the gift, the party.
Yeah, the party, the peak moment. So why do these sources insist so fiercely on rejecting that whole idea?
Because according to this philosophy, that conditional joy is precisely what leaves people stranded when the external stuff, the environment, collapses.
Ah, okay.
This
Yeah.
philosophy demands something deeper, a more stable anchor. If we treat joy just as a feeling, we end up spending our lives chasing the next emotional high, the next spike.
Right.
But the source material argues the true quality of this J.O.Y concept is its persistence. It's stable. It doesn't just vanish.
Okay, so persistence, meaning it's something that exists even when you're feeling, I don't know, emotionally blank. Or maybe when life hits and you can't dive into that sea of feeling, like the notes say.
Exactly, when you're overwhelmed or numb.
The notes describe joy as something that is absolutely there, beckoning for you to remain steady. Keep believing. So it sounds less like, euphoria
Definitely not euphoria.
and more like a steadfast commitment, a commitment to just keep going forward.
And what's really fascinating here is the deliberate contrast the source draws with that more common, maybe seasonal or situational joy.
You mean like holiday cheer?
Yeah, the notes mention how in society, especially around celebratory times like the holiday coming around, joy is many things to many people. But those depictions, they're often external, they're loud, maybe public.
Okay.
This personal J.O.Y, however, is found, and I quote, in the silence, in the darkness, in the most intimate of places.
Intimate places. So entirely internal.
Self-sourced, internalized. It's like an anchor you carry within you, and it's accessible no matter what storm is raging outside.
Okay, if we accept this definition, then joy as this fundamental internal anchor, like a persistent state of readiness. How do the sources tell us to actually use that anchor? What does the journey of yielding demand from us? Because that seems to be where the action is.
Right, that brings us squarely to the acronym itself. J.O.Y, the journey of yielding. And we really need to clarify what this yielding means.
Yeah, because that word itself can sound, passive. Or maybe even defeatist.
They can, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that couldn't be further from the source's actual intention.
That's where I wanted to pause, actually. Because most people hear yielding and they think surrender, right? Or giving up control, like I yield to traffic or I yield to a stronger force. Does the source tackle that common misunderstanding that yielding equals weakness?
It absolutely does. It clarifies that this is a focused, intentional redirection. It means yielding to the greater positive outcome or goal and purpose of your life.
Okay, yielding to something specific.
Yes, and it's explicitly defined as not succumbing to how I feel, but instead yielding to purposeful living. The choice to yield in this context is actually an act of high agency. It demands you look past the immediate negative feeling or the desire for instant gratification,
Right, past a
and
feeling.
instead align your current effort with your ultimate purpose, whatever that purpose might be for you.
Okay, so let's take an example. Maybe you're working toward a big long-term goal, something professional perhaps,
Yeah.
and you hit burnout. You feel frustrated, maybe defeated, ready to just quit.
Hmm.
The feeling is telling you stop. But the source is saying it's this concept, this J.O.Y, that pushed you forward.
That's the idea.
You're yielding past those feelings of defeat and into the purpose of the goal itself.
Precisely. It reframes the entire process as a conscious choice. And the source material connects this very heavily to the idea of belief and manifestation.
Manifestation. How so?
J.O.Y. is described as yielding to believing what I don't see yet, but I have a deep knowing it will manifest. Now, this isn't just, wishful thinking.
Right, it's not just hoping.
No, it's presented as an active trust, a trust in the eventual positive outcome that comes from sustained, purposeful effort.
That phrase, deep knowing, that feels like a critical detail.
Please.
How does someone maintain that deep knowing when maybe all the current evidence, the frustration, the failures, the setbacks points completely the other way? It sounds a bit like faith against the facts.
It is, in a way, and the sources suggest this is precisely why J.O.Y. has to be a non-feeling. If you rely only on the feeling of success, you'll stop the moment you encounter the opposite feeling, right?
Makes sense.
But if you rely on the persistent conviction of J.O.Y., that journey of yielding to the ultimate outcome, then you're actually equipped to navigate those temporary dips. You become committed to the path, not just the immediate scenery along the way.
That really does make the philosophy highly actionable. It moves it out of the abstract. And the notes connect this directly to literal, tangible steps you can take in daily life. Can you give us some examples? What does this purposeful yielding look like on the ground?
Yeah, sure. We're talking about specific, sometimes difficult, but consistent daily choices. It could be the choice to eat healthier when grabbing fast food is just so much easier,
Right.
or the choice to exercise even when you're completely exhausted, or maybe creating a better, quieter environment for your mental health when, chaos is readily available and maybe even comfortable.
Right.
These are yields. They're intentional choices you make, despite the opposing immediate feeling, maybe discomfort, maybe convenience pulling you the other way.
And there's an interesting twist in the result, isn't there? The notes say the ultimate goal of each yield is to produce things like the laughter or the smiles or a feeling of accomplishment.
Yes, the positive outcomes.
But the source insists that the J.O.Y. itself, the yielding process, is not inherently dependent on feelings. So the good feelings are like the reward, maybe a byproduct, but they aren't the fuel. Is that right?
That's the core mechanism described. Think about it. If you wait for the feeling of motivation or happiness to start exercising, you probably rarely start.
Guilty's charged sometimes.
Right. But if you yield to the purpose of health, that's the J.O.Y. you exercise, and then the feeling of accomplishment or the physical energy boost, that's the natural, secondary, and often temporary byproduct of that purposeful action.
So the process dictates the feeling, not the other way around.
Exactly. The action comes first, driven by purpose.
Okay. So building on that distinction, the philosophy then seems to move towards connecting this state across, well, all domains of our lives. It insists this purposeful choice can't just be siloed into one area.
That's a key point. The notes really emphasize that the mental, physical, and spiritual aspects of yourself go together.
They have to work in concert.
Yes, because if you yield purposefully in one area, let's say mentally, by committing to learn a new skill, but you completely neglect the others, like your physical health, through terrible sleep habits, the whole structure just becomes unstable. And the sources use this really powerful analogy to make this unforgettable.
Ah, this must be the universal Jenga analogy.
That's the word.
It's such a potent visual, isn't it? We all understand the tension in that game. You pull out one block, and the whole tower shifts, sometimes just subtly at first.
And that subtle shift is the danger zone. The source material is very clear about the consequence of living out of balance.
Yeah.
If one part of you is off, if the mental block is weakened by constant stress, maybe, or the physical block is out of place due to neglect, there is an immediate risk of it all crashing down.
Wow, crashing down. That implies really high stakes for our everyday choices.
It does.
Okay, this sounds compelling in theory, but when you think about that Jenga analogy, doesn't that inherently put immense pressure on a person to maintain all three blocks, mental, physical, spiritual, absolutely perfectly all the time? Where does the source account for, burnout or just the inevitability of human imperfection? We can't always be perfectly balanced.
That's a great question. And that's precisely where J.O.Y, this concept, proves its structural value. The philosophy isn't actually demanding perfection in the blocks themselves.
Oh.
It's providing the stabilizing force around them. Joy, this J.O.Y, is described as the force that builds up each block of you.
Holds them up like a support structure.
Exactly. It's the tension, maybe the internal commitment, that prevents the catastrophic collapse when those inevitable dips or stresses occur in one area. So if one block is momentarily stressed or even pulled out for a bit.
Like getting sick, perhaps.
Yeah, perfect example. If the physical block is shaky due to illness, the conviction of J.O.Y, that underlying commitment to purpose, helps maintain the overall structural integrity. He keeps everything else from immediately tumbling down.
So it's like the structural engineer of the self, almost. If the physical block is pulled out due to illness, J.O.Y ensures the mental and spiritual aspects don't just immediately follow suit, plunging the whole self into crisis. It allows time for recovery, for repair, all within a supported framework.
Exactly right. It shifts the entire focus from just managing symptoms or reacting to crises to maintaining the foundation itself. And the philosophy insists quite strongly that this isn't just some abstract theory to ponder. It's described as how I live it out.
How I live it out, meaning the author of these notes.
Yes, it's presented as a lived practice. By constantly yielding to purpose, day by day, you are actively reinforcing that structure. It means that this choice of joy, this J.O.Y, is actually presented as the ultimate form of self-care, because it's what ensures perseverance through the whole journey, the ups and the downs.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this. We've explored joy, redefined, really, as the steadfast internal conviction. A purposeful choice. That's the journey of yielding part. And the essential force holding our personal balance together, the mental, physical, spiritual parts. The Jenga force.
A good summary.
What really stands out to me is that by removing the need for positive feelings as a prerequisite, as the starting point, the philosophy ensures that action, purposeful action, always comes first.
And that choice of action is, I think, the critical takeaway. By defining J.O.Y as this constant internal force driving purposeful yielding, rather than just a fleeting emotional reward you wait for, it aims to guarantee that your foundation remains stable, regardless of how shaky the immediate external world might feel.
So you're no longer waiting for the feeling of happiness to arrive before you act.
Exactly. You choose the journey of yielding first, guided by purpose, and the rest, including the positive feelings, follows from that.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive. It's truly redefining a concept we, or at least I, thought I knew pretty well. The source material really transforms joy from something passive, maybe a gift you receive, into an active tool, a tool for resilience.
Well put. And that leaves us, and you listening, with the final provocative thought. It's pulled directly from these sources, something for you to apply this knowledge immediately. If J.O.Y is indeed your structural support.
A force holding up your Jenga blocks.
Right. Then we really have to ask ourselves, and you should ask yourself, what is your joy? What goals, what purpose are you on a journey of yielding to?